There is an animal alive on this planet right now that has 3 hearts, 2 of which stop beating when it swims. Its blood is blue, not red, carrying oxygen on molecules built from copper rather than iron. It has 8 arms that each contain a cluster of neurons large enough to make decisions on their own without consulting the brain. It can taste everything it touches. It can change the texture of its skin in 200 milliseconds. It can unscrew a jar from the inside. And it has been doing all of this for roughly 300 million years. Its lineage split from ours approximately 700 million years ago. If you imagine the tree of life as a single branching structure, the last common ancestor we shared with the octopus would be something soft and simple and barely visible to the naked eye, crawling along the floor of a sea that no longer exists. Everything that came after on our branch and on theirs happened independently. 2 completely separate experiments in what a living mind can become. 2 different answers to the same ancient question. And both of them arrived at something that, in its own way, recognizes the world it is in, learns from it, and plans. The octopus passed its version of that test in a way we still do not fully understand. It has been passing it quietly for longer than most lineages have existed. This is not a creature that lives at the bottom of the ocean beyond our reach. Many species live in shallow water, in tide pools, in harbors, in the rocky shallows where children wade. They have been watching us from those crevices for a very long time. We have been watching them for barely a century, and the more carefully we look, the more the comfortable distance between their kind of mind and ours begins to dissolve. Tonight, we are going somewhere that is not a place but a condition. We are going into a kind of thinking, a kind of existence that evolution arrived at by a completely different route and using completely different materials. We are going to the question that the octopus has always quietly posed to anyone who stops to look. What does intelligence actually require? And how many times has life been forced to invent it from nothing? This is not just a journey into a strange creature. It is a journey into the nature of minds themselves, into what it means to know something, to remember something, to want something, and into the unsettling possibility that the universe may be far more crowded with thinking than we have allowed ourselves to believe. If you find this slow, quiet exploration of mystery something you genuinely enjoy, I'd be grateful if you'd like the video and subscribe. Letting me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you is always a quiet comfort. Now find your comfortable position. Dim the lights. Take a slow breath. We are leaving the map behind. The picture most of us carry of the octopus is a cartoon. 8 arms waving in open water. Big eyes. A jet of ink. Something between a monster and a novelty. The kraken of old maps. The tentacled horror of bad science fiction. Or the opposite of that, a shy, boneless thing that squeezes itself under a rock whenever anything larger comes near. Harmless. Alien. Interesting in the way a sea cucumber is interesting. Briefly, that picture is wrong, not slightly wrong, not incomplete in a few interesting details, fundamentally, structurally wrong in what kind of thing an octopus actually is, and what is actually happening inside it. Begin with the body. The octopus has no skeleton. No bones anywhere in the body at all. The only hard part is the beak, which is made of chitin and sits at the center, where all 8 arms converge. Everything else is soft. a creature that can compress itself through any opening larger than that beak, which is roughly the size of a small coin. A fully grown octopus with an arm span of 1.5 meters can pass its entire body through a hole the size of a 50-pence piece. Researchers who keep octopuses in tanks spend a significant portion of their time sealing every gap and pipe and filter outlet throughout the tank's plumbing. The octopus finds them all. Given time, it will find everyone. This softness is not a vulnerability. It is one of the most sophisticated engineering solutions in the animal kingdom. Muscles that have no bone to push against cannot create movement by contraction alone. They need another method. Octopus arms are built from what researchers call muscular hydrostats, the same structural principle that governs the trunk of an elephant or the tongue in your own mouth. When muscles in one orientation contract, the arm stiffens or bends in another direction entirely. The arm can reach any point in three-dimensional space, rotating in any direction, shortening to a fraction of its resting length, or extending beyond what that length suggests is possible. And it can do all of this in 8 separate appendages at once, each operating with a degree of independence that has no parallel anywhere in the vertebrate world. Now, add the eyes. The octopus eye is not a simplified eye. It is not a compound eye like an insect's, or a pit eye like a nautilus, or anything in between. It is a camera eye, with a lens and a retina, and an iris. It arrived at this design independently from the vertebrate eye. The camera eye evolved at least twice in the history of life on Earth, once in the lineage that would eventually produce you, and once in the lineage of the mollusks. The lenses are different. The neural processing is different. The retina is oriented differently. But the result is structurally similar enough that, looking at a cross-section of each, you would have to look carefully to tell them apart. We picture a simple, soft creature, barely above the level of a worm. The octopus is, in fact, a masterwork of convergent engineering that has been refined over hundreds of millions of years. The absence of bones is not a limitation. It is the design, and the design works extraordinarily well. To understand how alien the octopus truly is, you need to understand how far back the branching goes. The story of life on Earth can be told as a series of divergences. Two populations separate. They are exposed to different pressures, different environments, different predators and food sources. Over time, they change. Over millions of years, they change so much that they can no longer recognize each other as relatives. This is how the tree of life grows, not upward like a single trunk, but outward in every direction simultaneously, each branch eventually producing branches of its own. The split between the lineage that would eventually produce vertebrates and the lineage that would eventually produce cephalopods, the group that includes octopuses, squids, and cuttlefish, happened roughly 550 million to 600 million years ago. The Cambrian explosion had barely begun. The most complex animals on the planet were things like early trilobites, simple worms, and the strange soft creatures that had preceded them in the Ediacaran seas. The ocean floor was not the richly decorated place it is today. It was sparse and strange and mostly quiet. From that common ancestor, one branch went toward what would eventually become fish, and then amphibians, and then reptiles, and then mammals, and then us. It took a spine, it built bones, it grew limbs, It came onto land. It developed vocal cords and opposable thumbs, and a neocortex and language. 550 million years of change and pressure, and selection and extinction and reinvention. A very long road to here. The other branch stayed in the water. It stayed soft. It eventually shed the shell that its early ancestors carried, and it went in the opposite direction from vertebrate intelligence. Rather than centralizing its nervous system into a single dominant brain, it distributed intelligence through its entire body. It placed neurons in its arms. It gave each arm something approaching a mind of its own. Both lineages ended up somewhere remarkable, but the paths could not have been more different. And the end results, while both intelligent by any reasonable definition of the word, look nothing alike. This is the thing that makes the octopus such a profound subject. When we look at a chimpanzee and recognize intelligence there, we are looking at something genuinely close to us. 98.7% of the same DNA, a shared recent ancestor, similar social structures, similar emotional range, similar physical form. The intelligence we recognize in a chimpanzee is, in a deep sense, a version of our own. When we look at an octopus and recognize curiosity there, recognize problem solving and personality, we are not seeing a simpler version of ourselves. We are not seeing the early draft of what we eventually became. We are seeing what intelligence looks like when it builds itself from entirely different materials and through entirely different evolutionary pressures, when it uses entirely different architecture and arrives at the same destination anyway. The octopus is not a lesser mind. It is another answer to the same question, and that distinction matters in ways we are only beginning to understand. The octopus has approximately 500 million neurons. For comparison, the human brain contains roughly 86 billion. A chimpanzee has about 6 billion. A honeybee has around 1 million. 500 million places the octopus in interesting territory. Not at the bottom of any scale, not at the top, somewhere in the middle range of what we recognize as complex neural architecture, closer in neuron count to some fish than to any mammal. You might conclude from this that the octopus is moderately clever, perhaps capable of simple learning, probably not much more. But the count is almost meaningless without knowing where those neurons live. In a human being, nearly all the neurons are concentrated in the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord. The arms, the legs, the organs receive instructions from that center and send information back to it. The architecture is hierarchical. The brain is in charge. This is the vertebrate model, and it is so consistent across fish, reptiles, birds, and mammals that we have come to treat it as the obvious, perhaps the only, way to organize a complex nervous system. In an octopus, roughly 2/3 of all neurons are not in the brain at all. They are in the arms. Each arm contains an independent ganglion, a dense cluster of neural tissue capable of processing information and initiating action without waiting for instructions from above. If you sever an octopus arm from its body, that arm will continue to respond to stimuli for up to an hour. It will reach toward food. It will withdraw from noxious substances. It will explore whatever surface it rests on, running its suckers along the texture with something that looks like deliberate investigation. The central brain is gone. The body is gone. The arm continues to behave like something that is, in a limited but real sense, alive and purposeful. This is not a reflex. Reflexes are simple loops. A stimulus produces an automatic response and nothing more. What the severed arm does is more complex than that. It discriminates, it chooses, it persists. The implications for what it is like to be an intact octopus are extraordinary and largely unresolved. When the octopus reaches an arm into a dark crevice to search for prey, the brain does not direct each individual movement. The arm searches on its own. The brain issues something closer to a general instruction, a broad intent, and the arm interprets that intent and executes it using its own local intelligence. The octopus brain and the octopus arms are engaged in something closer to a conversation than a command structure, a negotiation between the whole and its parts. Imagine what this might feel like from the inside, if it feels like anything at all. 8 semi-independent agents, each one exploring the world through its own direct contact with it, processing sensory information locally and acting without consultation. And somewhere above all of that, a central brain that tracks what the whole animal is doing, even though it did not author each individual movement. We have nothing like this. No vertebrate has anything close to it. The octopus nervous system is not a simplified version of our own. It is a genuinely different solution to the problem of how to run a body in a complex world. And it has been working for 300 million years, through the death of most other complex creatures, through 5 mass extinctions, through every catastrophe the ocean has thrown at it. Whatever the octopus is doing, it works. Each octopus arm carries approximately 2,000 suction cups, arranged in 2 rows along its inner surface. The number varies by species, but 2,000 is a reasonable figure for a mid-sized common octopus. 2,000 suckers, each capable of independent movement and independent adhesion, each capable of something that you would not expect. Consider what the suckers actually do. Each sucker is a muscular structure. It can adhere to surfaces by creating a pressure differential. Essentially the same principle as a rubber suction cup, but far more sophisticated and under far more precise control. The octopus can adjust the adhesion of each sucker individually, attaching and releasing with the precision needed to handle an object the size of a grain of rice without crushing it. The same suckers that can generate enough force to crack open a clamshell can, when called upon to be gentle, hold a single small shrimp without leaving a mark on it. But the suckers are not just for gripping. Each sucker contains both chemoreceptors and mechanoreceptors, sensory cells that detect chemical composition and physical texture simultaneously. When the octopus touches something with a sucker, it does not merely feel the surface, it tastes it. The sensation of touch and the sensation of taste are merged into a single input. The octopus experiences the world as something to be tasted by touching and touched by tasting. There is no word in any human language for this sensation, because no human being has ever experienced it. Our sense of touch and our sense of taste are 2 entirely separate systems, served by different nerves, processed in different brain regions, and never confused with each other. In the octopus, they are the same thing. Think carefully about what this means for how the octopus knows its world. When it moves an arm across the rocky floor of a tide pool, it is not just feeling the texture of the stones. It is reading a chemical record of everything that has recently been there. The trail of a crab, hours old, is still written in molecular traces on the rock surface. The presence of a rival octopus from the previous day still leaves a chemical residue. The octopus moves through its environment, reading it the way we might read a page. Except the page is everywhere, and it is read simultaneously by 2,000 small receptors. Add to this the extraordinary sensitivity to physical texture. The mechanoreceptors in each sucker can distinguish between surfaces that are to our fingertips completely indistinguishable. A crab buried under a layer of sand still leaves a faint change in texture and chemical signature in the sediment above it. The octopus reaches an arm around a corner, into a crevice it cannot see, and locates prey by touch and taste alone, with no input from the eyes at all. The arm searches, the arm finds, the arm communicates its finding to the rest of the body. We tend to think of intelligence as something that happens in the head, in the brain, in the centralized command structure. In the octopus, it is distributed. It happens in the arms, it happens in the skin. It happens in the ongoing chemical conversation between the animal and everything it contacts. The octopus does not observe its world from a distance and then act upon it. It reads the world continuously, through direct contact, through 2,000 small organs that simultaneously grip, taste, feel, and remember. This is what it means to touch something when you are an octopus. The octopus is colorblind. This is a fact that takes a moment to fully land, because the octopus is also the most sophisticated color changer on the planet. It produces patterns of extraordinary complexity on its skin, shifting through dozens of shades in under a second, matching color and texture so precisely that it can sit motionless on the ocean floor and disappear. To any passing eye, absent. Researchers have watched octopuses change their skin to mimic specific rocks, specific patches of sand, specific patterns of light, filtering down through shallow water. They do this in real time, continuously, adjusting as the light shifts and as they move. All of this while being entirely unable to see color. The octopus retina contains only a single type of photoreceptor. 1. The human retina contains 3, which is what gives us our ability to distinguish between red, green, and blue, and all the colors that blend from them. An animal with a single photoreceptor type is, by every conventional definition, colorblind. The octopus sees the world in shades of brightness, not in color. This should make color matching impossible. And yet, one hypothesis is that the octopus uses the shape of its own pupil as a kind of color sensor. The octopus pupil is not round. It is W-shaped or U-shaped, depending on the species. A strange and distinctive form that creates an optical aberration called chromatic aberration. Different wavelengths of light, different colors, focus at slightly different distances from the lens. An eye with a wide, irregular pupil would receive information about which wavelengths are present based on how differently focused they appear at the retina. The octopus may be sampling color not through separate photoreceptor types, but through the physics of its own strange eye, using the blur itself as data. It is a hypothesis. It has not been confirmed. The mechanics of how the octopus matches colors it cannot see remain, in the deepest sense, unresolved. But there is another possibility, and it is stranger still. Researchers examining the genome of the octopus found something unexpected in the skin itself. Octopus skin contains opsins, the light-sensitive proteins that are the functional units of vision. In vertebrates, opsins live in the eyes. In the octopus, they appear to be distributed across the surface of the skin. The skin may be sensitive to light directly. The octopus may be seeing with its entire body surface, sampling the colors around it through a distributed system of photoreception that bypasses the eyes entirely. This is not confirmed either. The opsins are there. What they do remains a question, but the possibility it raises is this. The octopus may have a form of visual perception so unlike our own that we do not yet have the conceptual tools to describe it. It may be seeing in a way that has no analogue in the vertebrate world. The colors it cannot see with its eyes may be perceived by its skin, through a mechanism we have not yet named, because we have not yet understood it. The ocean keeps its secrets, and the octopus keeps its own. The octopus is a predator, not an opportunistic one, not a scavenger that takes what the current brings past it. A genuine active predator with preferred prey species, preferred hunting strategies, and something that in any vertebrate we would describe without hesitation as tactical thinking. Most octopuses are ambush predators by default. They choose a position in their territory and they wait, their bodies flattened and colored to match the substrate so precisely that even at close range they are functionally invisible. When prey comes within range, they strike with a speed that the eye cannot follow, deploying all 8 arms in a coordinated spread that closes around the target before it has time to react, from absolute stillness to full contact in a fraction of a second. The crab or fish or shrimp that was moving freely one moment finds itself enveloped the next, drawn inward toward the beak at the center. But octopuses do not only wait, they also hunt actively. And the exploration of a rocky reef by a hunting octopus is not a random search. An octopus moving across the seafloor probes every crevice, every gap beneath a rock, every hollow in the reef structure. It does this in sequence. It does not revisit spaces it has already checked during the same pass. It appears to maintain a working memory of the terrain it has covered, a spatial record of what has been examined and what has not. When it locates a crab pressed into a tight crevice where a direct grab is impossible, the octopus does not persist uselessly with the same approach. It assesses the geometry of the situation. In many documented cases, it then turns its siphon toward the opening and jets water inside, forcing the crab out into the open, where it can be taken cleanly. The water jet functions as a tool. The octopus selects it when the direct approach is blocked, and puts it aside when the direct approach becomes available again. The actual killing is done with the beak, the only hard structure in the body, which can penetrate the shells of crustaceans and the cases of bivalves that would resist any soft structure entirely. The octopus also secretes venom, delivered through the bite, which paralyzes prey rapidly. In most species, the venom is mild to humans. In some, it is not mild at all. The blue-ringed octopus, a small and visually striking animal of the Indo-Pacific, carries tetrodotoxin in its saliva. A single individual contains enough to kill 26 adult humans. It fits comfortably in the palm of a hand, and it displays its rings only when directly threatened. After a successful hunt, the octopus returns to its den. The den is not simply a refuge. In many species, it is a maintained space. The octopus clears debris from the interior. It arranges the entrance. In documented cases, it positions shells, stones, and fragments of discarded prey at the opening of the den in a way that partially blocks entry from the front, reducing the angle from which a threat could approach. Researchers have photographed these arrangements. and returned the next day to find them rebuilt when disturbed. The regularity of the pattern and the deliberateness of the reconstruction suggests something more than accident. The octopus hunts with memory. It learns the terrain. It selects tools. It maintains a living space. In any other animal with a spine, this profile would be called sophisticated, without controversy. In the 1980s, marine biologist Jennifer Mather was conducting fieldwork in the shallow coastal waters of Bermuda. Observing octopuses in their natural habitat, she was doing what researchers in her field did at the time: watching behavior, recording what she saw, trying not to impose interpretations that the data could not support. She had been watching the same group of animals for long enough that she had begun, almost reluctantly, to notice something she had not gone looking for. The octopuses were different from each other, not in the way that any two animals of the same species are different, the way two sparrows differ in the precise arrangement of their feathers. They differed in disposition, in how they responded to novel stimuli, in how long they persisted with a difficult task before abandoning it, in how cautious or bold they were when approaching something unfamiliar, in whether their first instinct when a diver came close was to retreat, or to stay, or occasionally to approach. Mather began to document these differences systematically. She watched octopuses respond to a series of standardized stimuli and recorded the responses in enough detail that patterns emerged. Some individuals were consistently bold across multiple encounters. Some were consistently cautious. Some were variable in ways that the others were not. The differences persisted over time. They were not situational fluctuations. They were stable characteristics of individual animals. She called them personality traits. The paper she published, which appeared in the Journal of Comparative Psychology in 1992, was treated with significant skepticism by the broader scientific community. Personality, in the technical sense, had been documented in primates and in some social mammals. The suggestion that a short-lived solitary invertebrate might have individual personality was seen as an overreach by most researchers at the time. The skepticism did not last. Subsequent studies conducted on multiple octopus species across different research groups confirmed the basic finding. Octopuses within a species are not interchangeable. They differ in boldness and in activity level and in exploratory behavior, in how they respond to threat and how they approach food. These differences are consistent within individuals, across time and across contexts. By the formal definition used in personality research, they qualify as personality traits. Aquarium workers who deal with octopuses daily have known this for a long time, without the formal terminology. At the Seattle Aquarium, individual octopuses in their care have been given names not as an affectation, but as a practical necessity. The animals respond differently to the same keeper on different days, and to different keepers on the same day. One animal documented in the aquarium's records would consistently squirt water at a particular staff member and no one else. Staff interpreted this as targeting, as preference, as something that, in a person, they would have called dislike. Whether it was dislike in any meaningful sense remains an open question. But the animal remembered the person. It responded to that person differently than to others, and it communicated that difference in a way that was impossible to miss. The octopus does not only know its world, It knows who is in it. In 2009, a team of researchers working in the shallow coastal waters of Indonesia observed something that stopped them. They were filming octopuses during routine fieldwork, following individual animals through shallow reef and sandflat habitat, recording behavior. They were not expecting anything they had not seen before. And then one of the octopuses on the sandy bottom was carrying something. 2 halves of a coconut shell, cleaned out and stacked neatly together, held pressed beneath the body of the animal as it moved across the open sand. This was not completely unprecedented. Octopuses collect objects and use rocks and shells as barricades at the entrance of their dens. This could have been straightforward object transport, a piece of shelter material being moved to a new location. But the researchers followed the animal, and what they saw next changed the terms of the question. The octopus carried the coconut shell halves across several meters of open sand, walking awkwardly on the 6 remaining arms, while the shells were clasped beneath it with 2. Moving while carrying the shells was measurably slower and more physically demanding than moving without them. The animal was expending real energy and accepting real exposure to move these objects toward a specific destination. It reached an area of open sand with no natural shelter nearby. It stopped. It arranged the 2 coconut halves into a small dome shelter and settled inside. The octopus had collected portable shelter, carried it across terrain where shelter did not exist, and used it at a destination it had apparently selected before beginning the journey. This is tool use in the strict sense of the term, not the loose version of the concept, where any use of a found object counts. The strict version, an object collected in one context, transported across a distance at real cost, used in a different context to serve a purpose that was not yet relevant at the moment of collection. The usefulness of the shells was future-oriented. The animal was, in some functional sense, planning ahead. The paper was published in Current Biology and received, unlike earlier claims about octopus cognition, relatively little resistance from the broader community. The evidence was on film. Multiple individuals, multiple locations, multiple species. Octopuses use tools. The behavior has been replicated in laboratory settings and observed in the wild many times since. Planning in any animal requires something like a representation of a future state, a model of a situation that does not yet exist, but that could be brought into being through action taken now. This is a cognitively demanding operation. It requires memory. It requires the ability to hold a potential outcome in mind and work toward it. In vertebrates, planning is associated with areas of the prefrontal cortex, one of the most recently evolved brain structures in the mammalian lineage. The octopus has no prefrontal cortex. It has no cortex of any kind, and yet something in its 500 million neurons produces what looks, from the outside, like functional planning. What that something is, what the experience of planning might be for an animal with a distributed nervous system and 8 semi-independent arms, we do not yet have the language to describe. The shells are there. The behavior is real. What lies behind it remains in the deepest sense a question without an answer. Spend enough time watching an octopus, and the octopus will begin watching you back. This is not a metaphor. It is a documented behavioral pattern, noted consistently by researchers working with octopuses across species and across settings, both in the wild and in captivity. The octopus orients toward a diver or a stationary observer. It tracks movement. It watches what the human does, how they move, where they look. In many cases, particularly with animals that have had repeated exposure to human presence, it approaches, not to flee and then be drawn back, not to investigate briefly in the way a fish investigates something new, circling once and then losing interest. The octopus approaches and stays. It watches with what the people being watched consistently describe as sustained, directed attention. The eyes of an octopus produce an expression that is deeply strange and profoundly affecting. The pupils are horizontal and rectangular. They move independently in the socket. They do not look past you. They look at you. There is a quality of directed attention in them that is difficult to dismiss, even with a full awareness that the distance between their kind of mind and ours is vast, and even knowing that the impulse to read human feeling into animal faces is one of the most reliable cognitive traps we have. Cy Montgomery, the naturalist and writer who spent months in the company of researchers studying the octopuses at the New England Aquarium, described the first time a common octopus named Athena reached an arm out of the water and wrapped it around her wrist. The suckers moved slowly along the surface of her skin, tasting and feeling simultaneously. The arm explored her arm from wrist to elbow without urgency, without apparent alarm, without the jerky retreat and approach of an animal in conflict. Montgomery wrote that the feeling she had was of being met, of being the object of genuine curiosity from something that was, in some sense, asking a question about her. What kind of thing are you? Athena died 8 months after Montgomery first made contact with her. This is one of the most difficult facts about octopuses as research subjects and as animals to know. They have short lives. The giant Pacific octopus, the largest species, lives for 3 to 5 years. Most other species live considerably less than that. The common octopus lives for 12 to 18 months in the wild, sometimes a little longer in captivity. By the time an animal has been habituated enough for meaningful cognitive research, it may already be in the last quarter of its life. Every octopus relationship has an end built into it from the beginning. What the researchers at the New England Aquarium noticed, and what researchers in many other facilities have confirmed in less literary but equally direct terms, is the experience of being recognized by an animal that, by the conventional categories, should not be recognizing anyone. The octopus learns the difference between the people who care for it and strangers. It responds differently to different individuals. It appears to form preferences and aversions directed at specific people, not at people in general. Something is thinking behind those eyes. Something is looking back. What kind of something, and what that looking is like from the inside, we cannot say. But the looking is real, and it is directed at us with something we are going to call attention, because no other word fits. The octopus changes its skin constantly, and for reasons that go beyond camouflage. Understanding this requires separating the two systems that control what the skin does, because they operate at different speeds and serve different purposes. The first system is the chromatophore system. Chromatophores are pigment-containing cells distributed across the skin in dense layers, each controlled by a direct muscle attachment that expands or compresses the cell. When the muscle contracts, the cell expands, and its pigment becomes visible. When the muscle relaxes, the cell contracts, and the pigment disappears. These cells can be controlled individually or in coordinated patterns, and the speed at which the octopus can operate them is extraordinary. A full body color and pattern change can happen in under 200 milliseconds. This is not a gradual shift. It is an instantaneous transformation, like a light being switched from one setting to another. Beneath the chromatophores sit iridophores, cells that contain structures which reflect and refract light through thin film interference, producing iridescent colors that shift with the angle of view. These cells do not contain pigment. They produce color through physics, the same principle that makes a soap bubble or an oil slick change color as you move around it. The octopus can control the output of these cells too, though more slowly than the chromatophores. And beneath the iridophores, deeper still, the skin contains papillae, muscular structures that can be raised or flattened to alter the texture of the skin itself, producing bumps, ridges, spines, and surfaces that mimic rock, coral, coarse sand, or fine silt. The octopus operates all three systems simultaneously to produce camouflage that defeats not just color vision, but texture recognition, depth perception, and shadow analysis. It does not simply change color to match its background. It changes its three-dimensional surface to match the physical texture of what it rests on. When it settles on a rough piece of basalt, it makes itself rough. When it moves onto fine sand, it flattens. When it wedges between two surfaces and needs to be both textures at once, it produces a different pattern on each side of its body. But the skin is also for communication. Octopuses display patterns at each other. A male approaching a female produces a specific rapid, pulsing display that differs from the display he produces when the same female is occupied by a rival male. A threatened octopus produces high contrast warning patterns that attract attention rather than deflecting it, paired with a raised and spreading posture. In any other animal, we would name this immediately. Octopuses that have been in extended captivity sometimes produce patterns toward the glass of their tank that have no obvious camouflage function, patterns that appear to be produced in the absence of any audience. What the octopus is communicating in those moments, and to whom, is a question that remains open. The skin, it turns out, has more to say than we have yet learned to read. In the late 1990s, researchers at the Seattle Aquarium placed an octopus in a tank of floating objects, colored balls and small plastic containers and pieces of pipe, none of them of any functional value to an animal that needed shelter or food. They introduced the objects into the tank and then watched. The octopus played with them, not in the loose sense where any interaction with an object can be called play. In the more demanding sense used by behavioral researchers to define play, behavior in animals, repeated voluntary interaction with an object that serves no immediate survival function, and that the animal initiates and sustains in the absence of any external reward. The octopus returned to the floating objects. It pushed them with its arms. It released them and pushed them again. It did this for extended periods on multiple occasions. The behavior was not fear-based, not investigatory in the initial assessment sense that passes quickly, and not food-oriented. The objects had been thoroughly examined and found to contain nothing edible. The octopus continued interacting with them anyway. The researchers concluded that what they were observing qualified as play, by any rigorous definition of the term. This matters because play, in the animal behavior literature, is associated with a relatively small set of species. Mammals play, birds play, a few fish species appear to engage in something play-like. Play requires cognitive surplus, the capacity to engage in behavior that is not immediately purposeful, that serves an exploratory or developmental function, rather than a direct survival one. It requires the capacity to act in the absence of external motivation, and to treat the world as a space for experimentation, rather than purely a problem to be solved. The octopus has that capacity. Other evidence has accumulated alongside it. Octopuses in captivity have been documented escaping from their tanks during the night, crossing the room, entering adjacent tanks to eat the fish kept there, and returning to their own tanks before morning. The lids replaced, their nighttime activities detectable only by the disappearance of the fish and the faint traces left on the floor between tanks. Whether this is problem-solving for the purpose of food acquisition alone, or whether it involves something like satisfaction in the navigation itself, cannot be resolved from the evidence. But the behavior requires planning. It requires memory. It requires the ability to execute a complex sequence of actions in sequence and reverse them on the return journey. The octopus in the dark tank, crossing the floor at night, returning before dawn. There is something in that image that is difficult to fully account for with simple stimulus-response models. What does the octopus want? We do not know, but whatever it is willing to go and get it. The octopus lives alone. This is not a circumstantial fact about octopus behavior. It is a foundational condition of octopus existence. With very few exceptions among the more than 300 known species, octopuses are solitary animals from shortly after hatching until death. They do not form groups. They do not cooperate in hunting. They do not share territory unless forced by an extreme scarcity of den sites. They do not interact with members of their own kind outside of the single brief encounter required for reproduction, which, in many species, the female will actively resist until the male's persistence overcomes that resistance. The social life of their octopus is almost entirely absent. The solitude is not passive. Octopuses are actively territorial and will defend their hunting range with threat displays and, if necessary, direct physical contact. A resident octopus will drive away any intruder. An octopus losing a fight will deploy its ink not just as a visual screen, but as a chemical weapon. The ink contains tyrosinase, which interferes with chemoreception in other cephalopods and temporarily disables the attacker's ability to taste and smell. It disrupts the very system the octopus relies on most. The octopus fights hard when it must. Then it returns to its den and resumes its solitude. This means that everything we have been discussing evolved entirely without a social context. The tool use, the planning, the individual personality, and the recognition of specific human faces. In most accounts of vertebrate intelligence, sociality is presented as one of the primary drivers of cognitive complexity. Animals that live in large social groups need to track the relationships between dozens of individuals simultaneously. They need to model other minds and anticipate behavior. They need to form alliances and remember who helped them and who harmed them. The social world in this framework is the training environment for the sophisticated brain. Vertebrate intelligence, on this account, is substantially social intelligence. The octopus had none of this. It did not need to track alliances because it formed none. It did not need to model the minds of others of its kind because it rarely encountered them. Its intelligence evolved in response to entirely different pressures. The complexity of the reef environment, the spatial problem of finding prey across a three-dimensional landscape with multiple possible approaches, the challenge of surviving in a body with no armor in waters full of predators, faster and harder than anything the octopus can produce. And yet the octopus arrived at something we recognize as intelligence anyway. This means intelligence does not require sociality. It does not require language or cultural transmission, or an extended childhood during which skills pass from generation to generation. The octopus has almost no childhood at all. In most species, the mother dies shortly after the eggs hatch, and the hatchlings are on their own from the first moment. Every octopus learns what it knows from direct personal experience alone, with no model to follow and no instruction from any other member of its species. Everything the octopus knows, it figured out by itself. In 2021, a team of researchers at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology published something that immediately attracted wide attention and considerable debate. They had been monitoring sleeping octopuses using cameras and recording systems sensitive enough to capture changes in skin pattern during sleep states. What they found was this: octopuses undergo sleep cycles, and during one phase of those cycles, the skin changes. Colors and patterns cycle rapidly across the mantle and arms, resembling the active camouflage the octopus produces when hunting or hiding while awake. The scientists describe this as resembling rapid eye movement sleep in vertebrates. In humans, that sleep phase is when most dreaming occurs. They were careful with their language. The paper did not claim that octopuses dream. It described observable behavior that is structurally similar to a sleep state associated with dreaming in other animals. The inference that the octopus might be experiencing something during these episodes was offered as a possibility rather than a conclusion. That the skin flickers were the outward sign of internal visual experience. Possible, not confirmed, but the possibility is one of the most extraordinary in the field of animal cognition. If the octopus is experiencing something during those skin flicker episodes, that experience is happening in a nervous system, unlike anything we know well. The octopus brain during sleep is in a different configuration from the waking brain. Which parts of the distributed nervous system are active during these episodes, and which are quiet remains unresolved. Whether the arms are contributing, or whether the central brain is running the show alone, these questions have not been answered. The technology to answer them is only now becoming available. Watch a sleeping octopus in these episodes, and you see something that is both recognizable and completely strange. The body is still, pressed into whatever corner of the tank the animal retreated to when it decided to rest. The eyes are closed or partially closed, and then the skin begins to move. Patches of color appear and dissolve. Patterns that look like camouflage on different substrates flash across the mantle and the arms, changing every few seconds, sometimes more rapidly. It looks like something being remembered, or rehearsed, or experienced, in some sense that we do not have words for yet. One researcher, asked by a journalist to interpret what she was seeing in the video footage, paused for a moment, and then said, "It looks like it might be having quite an intense dream." She immediately qualified that statement as non-scientific speculation. But the footage was difficult to watch without that thought arriving uninvited. The octopus sleeps. During that sleep, something happens in its skin. What that something is, what it corresponds to on the inside, remains one of the most open and quietly astonishing questions in the science of animal minds. The female common octopus lays between 50,000 and 200,000 eggs. She attaches them in strings to the ceiling of her den, strand after strand, pale and translucent. And then she does not leave. She does not hunt. She does not eat. She aerates the eggs continuously by pushing water over them with her arms, cleaning them, removing algae and debris and anything that might interfere with their development. This continues for 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the temperature of the water. During this time, she starves. By the time the eggs begin to hatch and the tiny transparent paralarvae drift upward into the open water, the female is usually close to death. Her body has consumed its own muscle tissue to sustain the vigil. Some females die within hours of the hatching. Some survive a day or two beyond it. None recover. The reproductive investment is complete, and it has taken everything she had. The paralarvae are barely a millimeter long and immediately planktonic. They drift into the current. Most are eaten within hours by fish and filter feeders and the vast indifferent machinery of the open ocean. The ones that survive will receive nothing further. No guidance, no protection, no transmitted knowledge. They drift until they are large enough to settle. They settle and begin to hunt. They figure out the reef and the prey and the hiding and the tool use on their own, each one separately, each one starting from the same zero. There is no clean way to hold all of this together. The female octopus that learns, faces and plays and carries portable shelter, and watches back when she is watched. This same animal ends her life in a dark den, starving and alone, tending eggs she will not live to see become anything. The intelligence that took millions of years to evolve serves her to the last moment, and then it ends. Not gradually, not in old age, in deliberate self-erasure in service of the next generation that will never know her. The neurobiological story is clear. The brooding behavior and the cessation of feeding are regulated by the optic gland, a small structure near the brain. When it is removed surgically, the female abandons her brood and resumes normal life. The self-destruction is compelled by chemistry. It is not, in any conventional sense, a choice, but the chemistry produces a real outcome. The mother octopus dies in the den she cleaned and tended, beside eggs she will not see hatch, without leaving the dark for the length of her vigil. Whatever she is, whatever her experience amounts to, it ends there, in the dark, alone, having given the last of herself to something she will never meet. The ocean gives nothing back. It takes the paralarvae and scatters them into the blue. Here is what the octopus has shown us about what we throw away. In the waters around the Mediterranean coast, researchers conducting surveys of octopus dens have found that the animals increasingly use human debris as shelter. Tins, bottles, rubber seals, plastic caps, broken crockery. The octopus is an opportunist, and it will use whatever fits, whatever provides the enclosure it needs. In photographs of octopus dens, taken over the last 4 decades, the proportion of human-made materials at the entrance and in the interior of active dens has increased steadily and continues to increase. There is a particular irony in this. Let it settle. The octopus has survived 5 mass extinctions. It has been in the ocean since before the dinosaurs existed. It adapted to conditions that killed off the vast majority of complex life on Earth multiple times. It survived the end Permian extinction, which eliminated 96% of all marine species on the planet. The closest life on Earth has ever come to complete erasure. It survived by being soft, adaptable, intelligent enough to find new prey and new habitat when the old ones disappeared. And now it builds its dens from our garbage. Ocean acidification, driven by rising carbon dioxide levels, dissolves calcium carbonate. Crabs and mollusks, which are a significant part of the octopus diet, have shells made of calcium carbonate. As the ocean acidifies, those shells become thinner, weaker, and in some cases fail to form properly. The prey base of the octopus is being altered by changes in ocean chemistry. The octopus can compensate to some extent. It is adaptable. But there are limits to what 300 million years of adaptability can absorb in the span of a single human lifetime. The octopus has survived everything the natural world has thrown at it. It has adapted to cold and heat and pressure and darkness. It has evolved intelligence in the absence of everything we consider prerequisite for intelligence. It has been solving the problems of the ocean since long before we were here to pose problems of our own. We are the first thing it has encountered that it cannot adapt to faster than we change it. The octopus, looking back at us through the glass of an aquarium tank or through the acrylic port of a submersible, has been in the ocean continuously for longer than there have been flowers on land. It does not require our admiration. It does not require our concern. It has gotten along without both for an extraordinarily long time. But we are changing what it gets along in, and that change is happening at a speed that no evolutionary process can match. There is one more thing to name quietly before we move on. Global octopus populations appear in some regions to be increasing. The collapse of large predatory fish populations through overfishing has removed some of the octopus's primary predators. The octopus is, in certain respects, a beneficiary of the damage we have done to the ocean's food web. This is not a reassuring fact. It is a measure of how thoroughly we have rearranged the system. The octopus flourishes in the gap we left when we removed everything above it in the chain. That is not the ocean working. That is the ocean compensating slowly for what is gone. The octopus survives. It always has. But survival in a diminished ocean is not the same thing as thriving in a whole one. Return for a moment to that first branching. 700 million years ago, give or take 100 million in either direction. Something small and soft and undifferentiated split. 2 populations, 2 trajectories. One toward the spine and limbs and land and language and the questions. One toward the water and the shell and the loss of the shell. Toward the distributed nervous system and the 8 arms and the den in the dark. Both trajectories arrived at something that learns, something that remembers, something that can be said with reasonable confidence to have preferences and a perspective on its world, to experience in some sense what is happening to it. We spent most of our history not knowing this. The octopus has been looked at for as long as people have lived near the sea, and for nearly all of that time, it was regarded as a curiosity, or a hazard, or a meal. The idea that it might be a mind, a genuinely different kind of mind, is extraordinarily recent. Most of the research we have discussed tonight is less than 30 years old. Some of it is less than 10. What the octopus offers us, if we are willing to receive it, is something more useful than wonder. Though wonder is certainly part of it, what it offers is a proof of concept. Intelligence, it turns out, does not have one shape. It does not require a spine or a childhood, or a social group or a language, or 100 million years of primate evolution. It can be built from different materials, organized differently, distributed through a body in ways that have no vertebrate analog, and still arrive at something we recognize when we look at it. This matters beyond octopuses. It matters for how we think about the rest of life on Earth, the other minds we are surrounded by and have barely looked at. It matters for how we think about the possibility of life elsewhere, on worlds where the pressures and the materials and the evolutionary paths would be unrecognizably different from our own. If intelligence can evolve twice on a single planet through lineages that diverged before the Cambrian, through architectures as different as a centralized vertebrate brain and a distributed cephalopod nervous system, then the universe may be stranger and fuller and more various than we have imagined. The octopus in the dark water does not know any of this. It is looking for the crab it scented 3 minutes ago. It is tasting the rock with its suckers. It is thinking, in whatever way it thinks, about its den and what it found this morning and what it will find tonight. The philosophical weight of its existence is not something it carries. It carries coconut shells instead, but we can carry the weight. We can look at this animal, this alien built from the same ancient ocean that built us, and understand that we are not alone in the way we assumed we were. That the planet we live on contains more kinds of mind than we have yet named. That intelligence is not our invention or our property. That it belongs to any lineage willing to survive long enough to need it and strange enough to find it. The octopus looks back. Let that be enough for tonight. The reef is still out there. The dens are still occupied. Something is still tasting the dark water with 8 arms and 500 million neurons and watching, patiently, as the rest of the world goes about its sleep.